Economists are expecting 190,000 new non-farm positions were added last month, though it's a bit of a horse race when it comes to guesses from the big banks. Morgan Stanley coming in on the high side with a prediction of 233, while Deutsche Bank is taking the under at 160,000. Let's get right to our jobs panel about what we can expect. Joining us now, Harvard Kennedy School professor and former CEA chairman Jason Furman is with us in studio. And Club for Growth president and former Congressman Dave McIntosh is here. CNBC's Mike Santoli is here. He is our senior markets commentator. Jason, we were talking before we started about the economy. I think you think overall it's in pretty good shape. The two numbers that we recently had that you had commented on was that surprise GDP number above 3%, and you had some concerns about how that was generated, or some of the underlying, if you look underneath the numbers. And then the big job number from last week. And I got you to at least admit that the economy's in pretty good shape, but in your view, some of the juice that we're adding to it is more appropriate for when we're in a slow period, like mid-recession period, in terms of where Fed funds are and in terms of the stimulus. So to me, it sounds like you're attributing it to once again, to kind of a sugar high that we're still benefiting from in the economy. And whereas Dave, the Congressman McIntosh, thinks it's purely deregulation and tax reform to take the yoke off of business after the Obama administration. So you guys gotta argue with each other, because I have no feeling one way or another.
You were doing a good enough job on my position. I don't feel I
did I get it pretty good?
You did it well, Joe. Thank you.
I read your stuff, and I follow you on Twitter, and that's a rare thing.
You know, you look at the stance of policy. We did a 1.2% of GDP fiscal stimulus last year.
Right.
This year we're doing a 1.6% of GDP stimulus. Interest rates in Fed funds rate in the mid-twos.
Yep.
This is what you'd normally do if the economy was in a medium-sized recession. This is like a counter-recession policy package.
Right.
It's a policy package that works. I think the monetary policy right now is completely appropriate, so I'm not complaining about it. The question is, you know, where do we go once the fiscal stimulus wears off?
Mike, I said to Jason, if there really is inflation is pretty under control, why not, if you can do 3% this way, keeping the pedal to the metal, if there's not a day of reckoning, why not do it?
Right, which I think, but that means Fed patience, right? It doesn't mean cutting from here necessarily, you know, in anticipation of something.
Well, let's get Congressman in Club for Growth. We want growth. And your view is that this is not necessarily transient, I don't mean inflation, but the 3%, and that it's just what to expect when you cut taxes and deregulation.
That's right, Joe. That's right. We view it as a reset in the Trump era from the normal that Jason was used to in the Obama era of a sluggish economy. The tax cuts, the deregulation have reset the baseline, and that means we can expect 3.5% GDP growth, and the Federal Reserve can keep the interest rates at a very steady level. That is good for the markets and good for the economy. We're very pleased with the private sector productivity rate and the employment rate. That's what's driving, we think, will be driving this jobs report.
Congressman, I held this up earlier, and I mentioned this to Jason already, and Mike, did you get to read this? So one of the two legs for 3% that people said we just can't grow above these numbers because we don't have the population growth and we don't have the productivity.
By people, you mean me?
People that say that a lot of economists that say that 2.2 is max for what we can do. It's
Which is the most optimistic of anyone on the FOMC.
Right. Okay, I understand that. But does this, if this were to stay like this, in terms of productivity gains that we weren't expecting, would that cause you to be more optimistic about what our average growth rate could be, or this still doesn't do it for you?
Oh, of course, if it could stay like that, we're going to have superb growth. Yeah. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying we have this problem. The single most important variable to know about in the economy is the rate of productivity growth. There's nothing more important than that. And the single hardest to measure, most volatile, most noisy of the major data we look at is productivity, because you have GDP in the denominator, jobs in the numerator, denominator. Both of those are noisy. It adds a lot of noise to the whole thing. This looks good. Over the last 4 quarters, it looks good. You know, I would just, as a rule of thumb, take about a quarter of the good news and carry it forward, and the rest of the good news and assume it's noise and going to go away.
Dave, do you attribute those productivity gains, about 50% higher than it was the previous 10 years. Do you attribute that to Trumponomics?
I absolutely do. You look at when that kicked in, it was right as the tax bill passed, and then now 5 quarters after that. And even before that, you saw the lifting of the heavy hand of regulation. Both of those contribute to that productivity number, particularly the lighter regulation allows companies to deploy their workers in a much more efficient and an effective way so they can produce more. We're very pleased with the reset of the economy. The next step we'd like to see them do is secure liberal free trade, and then we think you'd get another boost in that efficiency and that leads to productivity. If we can see that and get Congress to stop fighting with each other and actually pass the new trade agreement with Canada and Mexico so we've got security in that, I think you'd see this productivity gain continue for another 4 or 5